Yeah, yeah. Like how you gonna live as a Christian? Like how you gonna live out a mission? Like how you gonna roll through the city and pray for the homeless but not for the wicked? Used to sit in the pew as a critic. I would look up like y'all too religious. I'm like, this is for me, I admit it. I said, this is for me, I admit. Had some brothers who smoking a dank. I can't judge them, I know that I can't. Cause I looked at my mama with hate. I made all my music for me and promoted it so I could blow it one day. And God told me throw it away. Like people was passing the J. Went to college, he changed my life. 22 and I'm living for Christ. And I'm about to marry my wife. And I ain't gonna marry her twice. I ain't rapping to put on the ice. Talking PB, we rolling the dice.
Hey, welcome back to the Thankful for the Day podcast. If I didn't run you off or scare you during episode 1, then you're joining us for episode 2. And the fact that we're even doing this is still mind-blowing to me. But I also think it goes to show how God can work and how he can align pieces of a puzzle to make a really beautiful picture. Episode 1, we spent some time talking about Sarah and kind of how this whole thing started for us and how she made it through her experience. And episode 2, we're going to spend time talking about and getting into my diagnosis, what led up to it, the diagnosis itself, and kind of those next few days that took place after the diagnosis. So, as always, we hope that you'll enjoy. Please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, follow us on this journey. We're not sure how many episodes we're going to make. We're hoping 100? I don't know. 20? 5? Who knows? But if you like it, just please show some love and let us know that, because we're going to share the story even if you don't. So even if you don't like it, we're still going to share the story because honestly, I think it's a great form for me of healing and processing what the last year of our life has looked like. So here we go. Episode 2, Thankful for the Day podcast. Let's roll. February 5th was a Saturday. And so I wake up and take a shower and notice that I'm coughing up some blood. And try not to get too hysterical about things, but also, hey, so hop out of the shower. And, when my wife wakes up, I say, hey, this happened. It was kind of weird. It didn't seem to be an absurd amount, but it did seem something that I should take notice of. So call the doctor's office, I believe that Monday, and let them know what's going on and get seen. So they get me in that following Thursday. So I call on Monday, they get me in on Thursday. And, for the most part, I'm still feeling okay. I'm having some issues eating. I'm having these, sporadic issues where I'm not able to swallow. And now I'm coughing up blood. So, doc checks me over. I'm very good about going in for my annuals. And so, of course, each year, and I had been for a long time a pretty big guy, 50 plus inch chest. I like to lift weights. And so I was rolling around about 260, 265. And so one of the conversations we always have is, hey, if you can shed a few pounds, but I know that you work out, I know that you exercise, so I'm not incredibly worried about that. But, it wouldn't hurt. Yeah. So outside of that, my blood pressure was good, my heart rate was good, my oxygen levels were good. They pull some blood to run some tests, and he says, we'll get back to you. Right now I think you're probably dealing with a really strong infection, a cold, possibly pneumonia, but I'll let you know. And so we got a call later that day, and he said, yeah, man, we think it's pneumonia based on we did a chest x-ray. And he said, based on the chest x-ray, we think it's pneumonia. And so, we'll call in a script to your pharmacy, and we'll have them get you started on some antibiotics. Yeah. All right, cool. So, this was during the last 2 weeks that I'd put in my 2-week notice to leave JAG. which was the program that I was running and leading at Edgewood High School at the time. And then I put in my notice with the high school. JAG was an entity that was its own, that Edgewood allowed them to have space inside the building. So Edgewood and JAG were two separate things, but Edgewood High School allowed JAG to operate within the high school because Edgewood believed in the program, what it stood for, and how it was going to help those juniors and seniors at the high school level develop and prepare for life after high school. So my last day was the 15th, and the next day, the 16th, was when Sarah was going in for surgery. So, I believe I got the antibiotics started on what would have been the 9th of February and maybe the 10th. And we head into the weekend, and then I head into what is going to be my last week at the school. And, by the time we get into that last week, I'm 5 or 6 days in with these antibiotics, and man, I'm not feeling any better. I'm actually feeling worse. I'm still coughing up blood daily, hourly, and things are just not feeling like I'm progressing. So Sarah's surgery happens on February 16th. I unfortunately was not able to go to her surgery because, and rightly so, the hospital believed that I had pneumonia. Don't want you up at the hospital. Understand that. Her mom is able to go with her, which is a blessing. We kind of make this realization at home that I'm not going to be able to go. She's not going to have me with her. And, it just really sucks. 20 years in a marriage, 20 plus years in a marriage, and, we do a lot of things together. We obviously have our free time and like our own time with our friends and not together, but we've always enjoyed spending time together. And we laugh a lot and we have a lot of fun. And then obviously when it's something serious, like a surgery, we want to support each other. And so was disappointed, but what do you do, right? And so I think I was pretty mad about that for an hour or two. And I realized at that point in time, being mad doesn't make any of it better. And if anything, it just adds more stress to an already stressful situation. And so I tried really hard to just accept it. I have had for years this perception that I can control things and, like things to be orderly and in control. And, now there's very little that we control. And I try to control far less now than I ever have before, just because there's no point. And it just usually creates a burden and stress and drama to situations that is not needed. So let it go. Was thankful that her mom was going to be able to take her up. And so they went up. Surgery went great. I got updates from Kate several times throughout the night. And, ultimately she came out of surgery and was passed out, but everything was great. Her numbers were wonderful. She handled surgery like a champ. Doctors believed that they had gone in and got the clear margins that they were hoping for. Didn't see anything else that raised alarm. And, things were 100% successful. They were going to keep her overnight. She wanted to stay overnight just to make sure. And they would be leaving, get up, get some breakfast, make sure you get one final check, and they'd be heading home on the 17th. So, this same time I'm at home, and my boys are at school. Our oldest son is still up at IU East, and Henry is in his senior year, so he's still going to school and dealing with all of these different things that are happening to him. And so I knew that I had just put in my notice. So, to me, I'm like, I've got some free time now. The plan for me was I was going to take the next 2 weeks of February. My wife was going to be off from work, and we were going to take these next 2 weeks and really just kind of dork out together, go on lunch dates, go on, just dork out, spend time together and relax. The plan was for me to start working for my father and his small local business called Fourth Phase. I was going to start that in March, and the plan was from March until August to just rock out working for him. I really felt like I was at a point in my career, being at the school and involved so heavily in athletics and with the youth, that I kind of needed a reset, if you will. And so I'd actually, at one point in January, spoke with my pastor, and we were talking, and I was just sharing my heart with him. And, you know, when you feel so impassioned to do something, it's hard to walk away from it. And you feel as if maybe you are not appreciating or using the gift that you were given. And so as I'm talking to him, I'm sharing this with him. And, you know, I do feel like God has placed it on my heart that I'm supposed to be impacting young humans, and I'm supposed to be in a school setting or a school environment, and, you know, those daily interactions. And so he's letting me talk and allowing me to kind of vent and process. And I don't remember the specific verse at the time, but, you know, he does say, he says, Mike, he says, you know, there was a point in time where Jesus went out to the desert all by himself. And he used that time to reset himself and kind of recharge his person. And, you know, he said that to me that night, and it clicked. Like, I just immediately started crying, and I thought, wow, okay. If Jesus has to have moments where he resets, how in the world do I think that I am stronger or better than him, right? And so, okay. And what it really did is it really opened the door for me to visualize not working at Edgewood High School anymore. I still knew I wanted to be around young humans, but I knew my scenery needed to change. And so fast forward a month, a few weeks, and, you know, we'd made the decision, put in my notice, take a break from education, and take a few months now and work with your dad. And I knew the work would be challenging. It is an IT company, so low voltage is what we do. So cameras, access control, lots of internet, Wi-Fi, access points, those kind of things. And so I knew I would be challenged weekly. I knew I would not be able to fill my meter the same way as working with young humans and with the peers and my all of my friends that I'd worked with. But I was really kind of excited about that, and was excited about the opportunity to just go and work and not bring work home with me every night. That's the one thing that I always told my wife. My wife knew if we could have had a mansion, I would have had our house filled up with kids 10 times over, because sometimes kids just need a week, sometimes kids need a month, and even in our little community of Ellettsville, Indiana, we have a lot of kids that just need somebody to love on them and to just share love with them and to show them love through accountability every single day. I'm going to be here every single day. And so anyway, that's a pipe dream for us, is to be able to either add on or build something different in which we can provide that opportunity for young humans, a place to stay for a day, a night, a week, a month, whatever it is. So anyway, I was looking forward to that change and looking forward to just having a few months where I could just go be an IT nerd. And, you know, at the time, my dad referred to me as the cable gorilla, because anytime we had to pull cable, because I was the young guy, I was up in the attics and in the basements and in the crawl spaces having to pull cable, and because of my size, hence the gorilla part. So I was just looking forward to being a cable gorilla and just seeing what the next few months was going to have for us. The plan, as it kind of started manifesting, one of my friends who I went to high school with and who I played football with, and who when I started at Edgewood back in 2010, he was the gentleman that I worked with. His name was Robert Boltinghouse, and he is, and at the time was the principal at Owen Valley High School. And so he and I have work experience together. He knows my heart. He knows the nature of you know what I'm passionate about, and he is always looking to improve his staff. And so he reaches out to me and and says, hey, man, I want you over here. I want you to come be a part of what we're doing. We're working on something really special. We're building something really special. And you're a perfect fit for what we're trying to do. And so, we had nothing confirmed, but there were some talks that I would be traveling across the river. And for anybody that knows the Edgewood-Owen Valley rivalry, it's a big deal. It's a big deal for a Mustang to leave and go become a Patriot. And as the names are so lovingly referred to, it's Sewer Pony are the Mustangs and the River Rats are the Patriots. And so, there was lots of different talk and jabs along the way of just, oh, you can't leave Edgewood, go to Owen Valley, you're a Sewer Pony, you can't be a River Rat, etc. And I'll say this again throughout, but one thing will always remain the same is that it doesn't matter where you're at, kids just need to be loved. And my wife said it to me maybe in December or January as we were talking about what these next steps might look like. And before we had found out anything, that, I'd thought about leaving Edgewood and felt like my time there needed to be done. And I had been made to feel that way on several occasions. And she said to me one night, we're talking in the bedroom, and this stopped me in my tracks. And she said, I don't think it matters where you go. She said, no matter where you end up, whether it's Owen Valley or in a different county or in a different state, kids are going to need Mychal Doring to love on them. And such a plain, simple statement, like, dropped me to my knees. I sat down on the little stoop in our bedroom and I just kind of stared at her like, how dare you say something so profound? Again, so simple, and it resonated, like it pierced my heart. And I thought, you're absolutely correct. You are absolutely spot on. It doesn't matter where I'm at. It doesn't matter what colors I'm wearing, what my mascot is. Kids need to be loved, and I have so much of that to give. And so that really was the breaking point for me to feel okay in my heart and in my soul that leaving Edgewood was going to be all right. And so now as weeks progress and we're having these little instances of, hey, there's opportunities other places, and hey, we want you, and hey, we need you, it started to feel okay. So the plan was take these last 2 weeks of February off, enjoy them with my wife as she's recovering. She goes back to work in March. I go back to work in March. I take the next, 5-6 months. And, come August, we'll see if there's an opportunity across the river for me to continue my education purpose in a building in a high school with young people. I don't want to get into it too much, and I'm going to try throughout this process. The one thing that my pastor always said that really stood out to me was the truth is always the truth. And if you're always telling the truth, you don't have to worry about not telling the truth. Now, how people respond to the truth, you don't get to control, and you don't get any say in how they respond to it. But if you are telling the truth, you have nothing to worry about. The truth is always the truth. And so I want to be very conscious of that. I don't want to bash, but I do want to speak truthfully. And so, the situation at Edgewood had, in my opinion, become very toxic for me. I was approximately 12 years into my position there, 11. When I started there, I started as an hourly employee, and quite honestly, for the next 8 years, I remained an hourly employee, and they were fortunate enough to continue to allow me to grow and develop into these different roles. And I'm not trying to be conceited here, but they knew that they had somebody that, one, was from that school. I mean, I graduated from that school. That was my community. I played football on that field. I played basketball on that court. I, threw shot and disc in those rings, and I walked those halls. So that's my school, number one. It's the school that we have raised our two children in. It's the community that we've raised our two children in. And they are now, graduated and getting ready to graduate. And so I definitely had this innate feeling inside myself that this is where I'm supposed to be. This is my school. This is my community. This is where my kids are at. These are the kids that I want to love and impact, and I want to be a part of their lives. I started coaching at the RBB Fields when my boys were 5 and 6 years old, and had continued that through them both being 13 and 14 years old. So I'd coached a decade down at those fields. I'd coached a decade on the basketball courts. The number of young human lives that I had impacted just from coaching has got to be in the hundreds. And these are now kids that I'm getting to see at the high school. So I've seen them as 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 year olds. And now I'm getting to see them as 16 and 17 and 18 year olds. And talk about a full circle. It makes me feel like that's what I'm supposed to be doing. And so, but I say all of that for probably at least a year, if not maybe 2, I fought against some of the feelings that I had and that had been displayed towards me at the school. And so we did get to a point to where I felt like it was best for me to leave and remove myself from that situation. And there are some details that we will get into at a later time about why I felt that way. I need you to understand, if you know me at all, I'm not one to point out a problem and then just walk away. If there is a problem that I see, I'm going to talk about the problem. We're going to address it and identify it. And then I want to help be a part of the solution. I want to try to fix it. I want to try to make it better, especially at a place that I'm so passionate about. And so for me to come to that realization that it was the right thing for me to do was to walk away was a very big step. And in large part, I felt very comfortable taking that step because of Sarah's comment to me about kids need Michael Doring to love on them no matter where you're at. So she comes home from her surgery. I'm still not feeling very well. We're coming to the 10-day cycle of my antibiotics, and we're realizing things are not good. At this point, I now am carrying around a full-fledged BAI bottle of water with me. I love their coconut water. It's delicious. BAI, if you want to send us some sponsorships, kudos. We do love your coconut water. And so I had those. We were drinking those, and I'd gotten to the point to where I had to keep one of those bottles with me at all times because of how much blood I was coughing up every day. So I send my doctor a message, I believe, on either the 17th or the 18th of February, and I say, hey, we're 1 or 2 days away from these antibiotics being out. I am no better than I was when I first saw you, and maybe, in fact, I might even be a little worse. Things were so bad there around that time, starting to get to that time to where my coughing was not constant, but it was every 5 to 10 minutes. I was coughing. Most of the time that I was coughing, I would cough up mucus and I would cough up blood. And it was so bad that my wife comes home. She's had this, I don't want to say it wasn't a major surgery. It was major surgery. And she's trying to rest. By all accounts, the best thing she can do, go home, hop in bed, stay there for as long as you can and allow your body to recover. She doesn't need to be up moving around. She doesn't need to be up playing games. She certainly doesn't need to be kept awake by her husband who can't stop coughing. And so, of course, she gets home on the 17th. We're both emotional. I'm emotional that I've not been able to be there with her. She's emotional because I'm feeling the way I'm feeling, and she hasn't been able to support me. And we're just thankful that we're both back at home and everything is lovely. So that first night she comes back, I want to be super husband. So she gets home feeling good. She's walking. This is great. She feels okay, obviously a little sore. She hangs out for a little bit, and then it's basically right to bed. And so I come to bed that evening, and just horrible. I had gotten to the point where I was keeping that bottle with me at the side of the bed and was keeping some tissue with me. And I just kept her up all night long. Every hour, she's waking up to me coughing and hacking and just going through this mess, if you will, of my symptoms. And so by the time we get to that following Monday, I'm telling her, like, babe, I'm going to sleep out in the other room. It's not fair to you. Both of us should not be miserable. If one of us is going to be miserable, we need the other one to take care of the one who's miserable. And I was completely interrupting her sleep cycle and her sleep pattern, and she was not able to get continued amounts of sleep, which is what we wanted for her to get. So I decided at that point, I'm going to sleep out in the living room or the front room. And so that's what I did for the next few days. Of course, the daily interactions, because I had planned to take February off, and she's off as she's recovering. We were around home. And again, our oldest, Isaiah, is up at school, and Henry is going to school every day and preparing for baseball season. And so, we still had our days together, but the days looked a lot different than we thought they were going to. We thought we would be, having lunch dates. We had a couple projects around the house that we talked about maybe trying to work on. And, I was not able to eat very much at that point in time. And so we found ourselves really just basically trying to maintain the hours that we had together and try to figure out what the heck was going on with me. And so it was that week of the 21st, I believe. We'd come back. I'd gotten a hold of Doc. He said, "Hey, we think there's something else going on here." And so they did some pathology. They brought me in, and they wanted to recover a couple of the tissue from this spot that was on my lung, and they wanted to kind of further test it. So that's going on. That same week, Sarah's pathology report comes back. She's all clear, cancer-free. So again, we're in this dichotomy of, yes, we have so much to celebrate. We're so thankful that we caught this early and that she now has this 100% cancer-free, clear mark. But what the heck is going on with Mychal? And so, at that point, I don't remember the day, but that week we go in and they put me under for surgery. They take a couple samples from the spot that was on my lung. They gave me a breathing treatment, which was amazing. I don't know what they did, but for a few hours anyway, I felt like, this is great. I'm not coughing. And maybe they've cauterized. They didn't cauterize anything, but it felt like they had cleared something up to make my breathing and the coughing. My breathing was way easier. The coughing was way less significant and way more under control. And at that point, I was still trying to figure out what was going on with my esophagus. So we're waiting to hear back from the pathology on my stuff. I had gone in to meet and see a ear, nose, and throat specialist. Shout out to Mrs. Cheryl Pittsford. She's amazing. As always, she takes great care of people. She took great care of me. And, when you're going through something scary like this, the difference that a friendly face and a warm smile and somebody that you trust makes all the difference in the world. And that's exactly how I felt when I met with her. And so she did a series of examinations, and she came back and she said, Mychal, we're not seeing a lot. one possibility that we might have here is we might look at stretching your esophagus. Sometimes they become restrictive, and there's a process that we can take you through in which we can stretch out that esophagus, and it'll help for food to pass more easily. Because on the surface, through at least the ear, nose, and throat, there was nothing that was standing out to her that caused her any alarm. I went in and did another test where I had to drink a certain amount of fluid, esophagram. And so you had to drink these varying fluids at different times, and then they were taking these x-rays all the way down of your esophagus. So they were watching as you swallowed. They were, taking these x-rays of how your throat and esophagus and the lining and all that was working. And so I had gone through that. And we had done February 25th, I believe, is when we had done the bronchoscope. So I'd gone in, they pulled these samples, and now we're waiting. And so they come back. They pulled 5 samples because we had some swollen lymph nodes that they had found. So the lymph nodes were concerning. They pulled 5 samples from 2 of the lymph nodes for a total of 10 samples, 5 from each. Initially, there was no blood in the lymph nodes, which was awesome. So Doc calls us the week of February, I believe, 21st, 22nd, and says that they're concerned. There might be something more here than pneumonia. He mentions lymphoma to us. Lymphoma obviously takes us in a way different direction than pneumonia does. But our initial thought was, okay, lymphoma. That is not incredibly aggressive, and it is fairly treatable. And as we're doing our Google searches, we're like, okay, we can handle this. We can deal with this. And so based on some of the other testing that had been done, they found that the lymph nodes around my esophagus and around my left bronchial tube were enlarged. They were swollen. My right side looked very healthy and very good. My left side was not as nice looking. And they had noticed that there was some liquid building up. So because the lymph nodes were so enlarged, they were pushing in and on and around the esophagus, which was creating my swallowing issues. Because they were so enlarged, it was what was also creating the blood to be in the airways. So lymphoma was definitely a point of conversation. They wanted to test for that, and still were holding on to maybe the idea of just a really, really bad, severe infection. So we go in for the esophagram, as the esophagram is going to give us more details as to the path down for the eating and the swallowing. And the bronchoscope was going to be a couple days after that. So the bronchoscope is what was going to allow them to pull the samples from those lymph nodes. And they were going to, while they were in there, if they could, they were going to try to take a look at that spot on my lung and, see if they could pull enough out of that to get us some more answers. So he said when he was in for that bronchoscope, he was going to cauterize my left bronchial passage, and that would help with the inflammation and help with the blood, which I was obviously all for. So February 23rd, we have the esophagram. February 25th, we go in for the bronchoscope. And here's what we pulled away from some of that. They pulled 5 samples from 2 of the swollen lymph nodes for 10 samples total. There's no blood in the lymph nodes, so that we don't know, but they tell us that's a wonderful sign that there's no blood there. The lymph nodes are so enlarged and kind of angry that they are creating a large amount of problems. They're constricting the airway, but they are not the reason for the blood. The fluid that is on and around my lung is all blood, and it's lots of blood. They gave me an IV steroid, which was awesome. I was given IV medicine for specific treatment. And at this point, we're just waiting for the cultures to come back. The cultures, they told us would take a few days, possibly 5 to 7 business days. And of course, when you're in that moment, you want that information as quickly as you can get it, right? What is our next step? And so you just have to basically sit and wait patiently. And you've got all these emotions flowing through your brain. You're hoping it's just a pneumonia, not anything worse. Lymphoma has been mentioned. And so what is it? And what's going on? What's happening? And so, excuse me, because of the steroid and the treatment that they gave me, I was feeling better and finally had a little relief and had felt the best I had felt in essentially a month. I think actually the text message that I sent to one of my buddies was, had a much better night last night. It was one of the best nights I've had in a couple weeks. And just felt like we were at least moving in the right direction. Although we didn't have answers, we felt like we were at least starting to make our way towards finding those answers. And, just praising my doctor for pushing to go, as well as the other doctors that he had gotten involved. He had gotten a heart specialist involved, and I felt really good that Dr. Elsa Mead had come into the equation to try to figure this out for us. So that basically carries us through the end of February. And, the next date that really sticks out to me is March 2nd. And that was, I believe, a Wednesday. And I think we might have actually been in spring break or right before spring break at that time. And that was only relevant to Henry because I wasn't working at the school anymore. But he was home, so it must have been late afternoon. And we get the call from Dr. Elsa Mead. It's from his office, and it's actually from him. And we had talked a couple times on the phone, so I felt like I had a decent understanding of his tone and his effect, and just kind of his vocal body language, if you will. And when he called that day, and I answer, and still feeling pretty, I think, optimistic about what the diagnosis was going to be. And as soon as he says my name, I'm like, okay. And I believe at the time, my wife and Sarah and Henry were in our bedroom. They were talking, hanging out, doing something. And so I get the call, and so I walk back to the bedroom because if he's going to tell me something, I want her to hear it also. Obviously you'll remember, but how am I going to process? And I wanted her ears to be listening as well. And to be really honest, as I walked in the room, I forgot that Henry was there. And in hindsight, that is not. So he's talking, and he says, we have the biopsies back. And he said, man, and he paused and he says, I don't have good news for you. Okay. He says, this is lung cancer. We're not sure where it's at, but it seems like it's pretty aggressive. And more specifically, you have what is called nut midline carcinoma. And he says, what I want you to understand about this is I've never dealt with anything like this. I'm a heart guy. I'm not a cancer guy. And this particular type of cancer, I've never seen. So, shit. Okay. And it was a very somber phone call. And I think he acted like a champion in that moment. I don't think I could ever be a doctor. I don't think I could ever muster the power to call somebody and tell them that their life is about to change forever. Not in that way. And so we hung up the phone. And I think we both just started crying. And I'd forgotten my son was in there, and probably not the way that I would have wanted him to have heard or to be told that. I can't imagine being an 18-year-old kid and hearing that news, no matter how mature you are. And you could hear the fear in the doctor's voice. And at some point, we made our way back out to the front room, and I remember looking at Sarah and I said, if this is it, it's been a really, really good ride. And I'm so thankful for you. And rightly so, she got mad at me. I think she slapped me on the arm and was like, shut up. Don't talk like that. And the rest of the day, I'm not even really sure. I know excuse me. I know I called my mom, and I know I called my dad and my stepmom. And my dad stopped by that night. I think might have been the next day. To be honest, I'm not real sure. I know it was within 24 hours. I think honestly that night we just kind of sat on it. And I think the next day I started making phone calls. And so I called my mom, talked to her. I called my dad. He and my stepmom came over and told them in person. And yeah, lung cancer. Nobody felt real good about the prognosis of it. And not only is it lung cancer, but it's also a nut, capital N, capital U, capital T, midline, means the middle of your sternum, the midline of your body, carcinoma. And so we learned a lot in the coming weeks about lung cancer and what was going on. So the real ironic part to all of this, well, there's a lot of them, but one of the ironic parts to this was either March 4th, I believe the very next day, my wife goes in for one of her follow-up appointments from her surgery. And it was her 2-week follow-up post-surgery. And so she, by all accounts, 2 weeks have gone. She is progressing amazingly. There's, very minimal swelling. There's no bleeding. Her health and her spirit and her brain are working. There's been no ill side effects, and she's basically just being a rock star, which would become her nickname. And so we go up for this appointment and this checkup, and she's going to be given this glowing review. And we get up there, and we're now, 24 hours essentially processing this information about myself. And I don't even think it had been 24 hours. I think it was the very next day. And she meets with our doctor. And, when we talked about her experience, talk about being felt like you were given a lifeline with Dr. Lodich and this group up at Community South. And that's how we felt. So, I've got this warm, glowing feelings about these people and how they've managed to make my wife feel like a human and like a person and like a woman, and how they've just considered every aspect of this whole process. And so we go up, and she, sits down, and she examines Sarah, and she says, "Oh my gosh, like 2 weeks out and you look amazing. This is wonderful." And Sarah just loses it, had been very stoic and had put on this brave face for the 20 minutes that we had been there. We'd see the receptionist and the nurses come in and do their checks. And so she had been just so stoic through that whole process. And now is just at the point where she just can't hold it anymore. And, it's that meter that is just filling, and then it gets to the top and explodes. And that's where she was at. And she just loses it and starts bawling uncontrollably, sobbing and crying. And if you know my wife, she's not a very pretty crier. She's an ugly crier. And she's, snotting on herself. And it's funny now. In the moment, it was heart-wrenching. And it was, it hurt to see her be that hurt. And she could not muster the words. And so I say, "You'll have to excuse her, Doc." I said, and they knew I was sick because I'd missed the surgery. I'd been there at all the appointments and I'd missed the surgery. So they knew I wasn't feeling well. And I said, "We found out that I was diagnosed with lung cancer." And she's completely taken back. And of course, I'm very sorry to hear that. And oh my goodness, all the normal reactions that anybody would have. And I said, so she's just kind of processing and dealing with that right now. And we are incredibly happy. We know that she's healing well, and we feel really good about what's going on with her. But we've kind of been slapped in the face a little bit, and actually ran over with a semi-truck is kind of, I think, how we felt. And so she says, of course she understands, and Sarah's able to compose herself rather quickly, and they're able to talk and finish the appointment. One of the things that we had done, we hung up the phone on the 2nd, and I think as a way for me to disassociate and to kind of just create some space, I start making some phone calls. I start calling I start Googling cancer centers and doctors in Indiana that have dealt with lung cancer. And I start composing this spreadsheet of places to call and where we can go seek second and third opinions. And so we have this list with us. It's on my phone. And we ask Sarah's doctor that day, "Do you know of anybody? Where should we turn at this point in time?" And she immediately pulls out her phone. And when I tell you this woman is amazing, She dials a phone number immediately. And she gets one of her peers on the phone, and she says, "Hey," explains the situation and says, I need to know who you recommend. Where can I send these people?" "Okay, I know you don't have an answer for me right now, but let me know when you do." So our appointment was done. We, we had the follow up with the doctor. And so now she's done with us and she sends us on our way. So she says, hey, I will call and let you know as soon as I find out what's going on, as soon as I hear back from my peer. So we're up on the south side of Indy. We are traveling down Southport Road and we're getting ready to turn onto 69. So we've been out of the building for less than 5 minutes. And she calls us and she says, hey, here's who you need to call. And she, oh man, I don't even know why that's making me emotional, but she says, you need to call Dr. Hannah. He's at IU Simon Cancer Center, and he is the guy. And we say, okay. And I pull my notes up on my phone, and I promise the first organization I have listed on the top of the sheet is IU Simon Cancer Center and Dr. Hannah. Years ago, I would have said coincidence. That's not a coincidence. That's a God move. That's a God move, aligning those pieces for us. Even if we wouldn't have had the information from Sarah's doctor, that was going to be my first phone call. And so now that we have this information from this doctor that we love and respect, and it matches up with who is on our list, okay, that's what we're doing. And so I call them on the way home, probably within 3 minutes. And I call, and of course, you're not going to just call and speak to the doctor. So I spoke with a nurse, a receptionist, and, just kind of lay out my story and where we're at and what's going on. And, we would like to get a second opinion. And that's where we go. That's what happens. Dr. Hannah has us, pretty sure my wife's follow-up was on the 3rd. We talked to him or somebody at IU Simon Cancer Center on the 3rd. And we meet with Dr. Hannah, I'm pretty sure, on March the 7th, which is a Monday. And March 11th is my first chemo treatment. And when we meet with him on the 7th, he confirms that it is lung cancer. He confirms that it is the nut midline carcinoma in particular is very aggressive. Lung cancer, that can happen to anybody. And he communicates in this particular instance, because I asked, he asked if I was a smoker, and I said no. I said I used to be. I smoked in high school and then for a few years after. I said, but it's been, probably every bit of 15 years since I've smoked. And he said, smoking doesn't have anything to do with it. This is a complete genetic mutation from your gene standpoint. He said, there is nothing that you have done to create, and there's nothing that you could have done to stop what happened from happening. And he said the nut midline carcinoma is incredibly rare. He said on average, this usually affects 16 to 23-year-olds, and it affects less than 1% of the population. And so not only does it affect a really small percent of the population, but if it affects anybody, it usually is in this much younger age demographic. And so, hearing all that, okay, so nothing I could have done to prevent it. Essentially, 2 of my genes, an HD gene and a PD gene, that are like a Romeo and Juliet. They're not meant to ever be together. I guess depends on the definition of meant to be together, but they're two genes that are from separate families that should never communicate. And there's no reason for them to communicate. However, when they do, you end up with this genetic mutation. And because mine decided to have this forbidden relationship, they had created this particular cancer in myself. And in doing so, have now essentially, as he said, they are pushing on the gas pedal and they are creating cells, they are affecting cells very rapidly inside your body. And that was one of his major concerns, was that we needed to try to figure out a way to halt the acceleration of this genetic mutation. And so we meet with him on the 7th, and he says, we'll start chemo this week. And we say, okay, we say, what's the point of the chemo? I've got my own history with chemo from a family standpoint, and I've known several friends and family that have gone through chemo, and so I have my own opinions about chemo. But I say, what's the idea? Why are we doing this? And he says, basically, we need to try to stop these genes from continuing to mutate. We want to decrease the tumor size. If we can decrease the tumor size, then we feel like we'll at least bring you some more comfort in your eating, and things will become a little easier for you. And so, somewhere along those lines, I think in late February, we had some scans done, and we knew that the cancer had metastasized started in the left lung, had traveled down to the top of my abdomen, and then had skyrocketed up through my lymphatic system around the esophagus. And so if you can envision a hot dog, I know this will be crazy, bear with me, a hot dog, my esophagus is the hot dog. And the esophagus runs, essentially from around the bottom of your neck area to the top of your abdomen. On average, for most people, it's anywhere around 14 to 22 centimeters. And what this cancer, it's not my cancer, I retract that, it is not my cancer. What this cancer had done is it acted like a hot dog bun, and it had engulfed my entire esophagus. And so one of the questions that we had asked Dr. Hannah was, can we operate on this? Can you go in and remove it? Can you take the spot off the lung? And his response was no, because it had so engrossed my lymphatic system that they would have caused me so much more difficulty and harm going in and trying to operate on it. That would have been a lot more damaging to my system than the cancer would have been. And actually, he said, because of the location of it and where it is, we would have to crack your sternum and operate on both sides of the body. And that's just not something that we're going to do. So, yay, chemo, here we come. And so on March 11th is when we had our first chemo treatment. And that was also an experience as well. So March 2nd, we get the diagnosis. March 7th, I have a PET scan and a brain scan. And I believe we met with Doc Hannah on the 8th. And on March 11th, we are in a chemo chair. And so the chemo experience is one that is a whole episode on its own. And it's one that I'll go into great detail about. There's a lot of things, some good, that actually come from this in some way that I've been moved and impassioned. But you want to talk about a roller coaster of emotions and of health, that's what you're in store for if you so choose to come back and continue this journey with us. I do thank you for coming back for what we think is maybe our second episode. This would, moving forward, would possibly be our third. We're still trying to figure all this out. Our next episode, we're going to dig into that chemo session, the very first one on March 11th, what that looked like, how it felt, and we'll go from there. So, as always, appreciate you investing your time to listen and share this journey with us. We appreciate any feedback that you have. We do want to make this a quality podcast. It's unbelievable the amount of time and effort and energy that my two friends, Will and JT, have invested into this, and to make it something that is not just me in the corner of my bedroom with my iPhone and a fake plant. So just know that we're striving to make something of quality production here. And please share any feedback that you have. And just know that I'm trying to give you this story as real and as uncut as we can. And I do blunder and I do get my dates a little confused, and sometimes the timing of things. When people say chemo brain, believe that that's a real thing. It is absolutely a real thing. The effects that chemo has on your body. A lot of the chemo that they disperse now into patients has a form of mustard gas still in it. And so just imagine the fog that can happen. And so I do apologize if you know certain facts to the T and I've, misspoke them or, said it happened on a Tuesday, but it happened on a Wednesday. Just know that that's not me trying to embellish or make things up. That's just me trying to go back and, in chemo brain fog, present the information as best I know how. And we are working on creating some notes so that I can stay more on track. But we do thank you, and we do hope that you'll share this with somebody that maybe is going through this. The biggest thing I think I can do, no matter how much longer I'm here, is create awareness and create and spread positivity, and to let people know that it does not have to be a death sentence. And there are ways through community, through faith, through God, through family, through love, that you will be okay. And just appreciate you taking time to listen, and hope that you'll come back and join us for the next one.
I like, this is for me, I admit it. I said, this is for me, I admit.